But the news does, of course, continue here on BBC One, as now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rita. You're watching South East Today. Our top story tonight. The collapsed business that's left more than 150 investors £30 million out of pocket. We have an exclusive investigation.
When it's an inheritance, you feel like you've really let your parents down.
After some passengers had to wait 24 hours to cross the Channel, a review of the weekend's chaos at Dover. We're live at the port with the latest.
We love it. Well done, fella.
The marathon that nearly never was. Thousands of runners revive Brighton's annual event. And springing up, the floral display providing a welcome sight at Wakehurst this Easter. Hello. First tonight, the BBC has discovered Kent Police is investigating complaints about a Tunbridge Wells property business after it received approximately £30 million from more than 150 private investors. Joint Ventures in Property, or JVIP, was made up of more than 140 different companies, many run by a man called Peter Dabner, but the business collapsed last year. Investors, some of them elderly and vulnerable, fear their money may be gone forever. Our special correspondent Colin Campbell has more.
We established Joint Ventures in Property in 2002, and since then we've been involved in delivering over 150 different sites.
JVIP was a Tunbridge Wells business offering rich rewards to private investors.
Delivering inspirational homes at every level.
But a year ago it came crashing to the ground.
When it's an inheritance, you feel like you've really let your parents down.
Ruth Fretwell, who lives in Brighton, handed over £190,000, reinvesting £60,000 just a few weeks before the business ceased trading.
I was told that they were buoyant and managing COVID well and still competing against competitors who'd gone under, and assured in no uncertain terms that everything was just fine for JVIP, and I stupidly believed what I was told.
Mark Palmos from East Grinstead invested more than £400,000.
When we started off, we were invested specifically in properties. We were taken around, we looked at physical properties. Now it's quite clear that what we invested in was paying off interest for other people, and that's not right at all.
We're very proud to be here on stage today.
Revealing the secrets of their success to property entrepreneurs, Peter Dabner ran the business with his father Dick Dabner, who stepped back in around 2020. Investors were told their funds would be used to purchase and refurbish or develop properties, offering annual returns to investors, often in excess of 10%.
Come on, the dogs.
In Sussex, Dr. Peter Coxon invested a total of £255,000. Like others we've spoken to, he says JVIP offered him security on his property investment, known as a first charge, but it was never registered, leaving him with no security when the company collapsed.
They believed that by taking in more and more money from investors, even though they knew they were in trouble, they'd somehow, muscle their way through this. In many respects, it would appear latterly it's operated very much like a Ponzi scheme.
He says that because the first report by administrators in April 2022 states that quite often, rather than funding specific projects, it appears that monies borrowed have been used to fund overheads, interest payments and redemptions across the associated companies, and that investor money may have been funding substantial losses over a considerable period of time.
Building futures together was one of the slogans used by Joint Ventures in Property, or JVIP, and this is one of the sites they claim they were developing here in Southborough in Tunbridge Wells. As you can see, it is now derelict. But investors have many questions. Why did the company fail so spectacularly, and what was investors' money really being used for?
It's been suggested economic uncertainty caused by the pandemic impaired the group's finances and that the management team had tried to put it on a long-term footing. But it's difficult to piece together exactly what happened, as there's no accounts for many of the company's last 2 years of trading.
We're also one of the companies that I think are very open about the things that we get wrong as well.
We provided Peter Dabner multiple opportunities to explain where and how things went so wrong and a detailed list of questions which he declined to answer. Many investors were left unhappy with answers to their own queries or had no answer at all.
Mr. Dabner, can you tell us please what's happened to the millions of pounds that investors have given to you?
Excuse me.
Can you tell me what's happened please to the millions of pounds that investors gave to you? Did you purposely defraud people? Did you purposefully defraud investors, Mr. Dabner? It's suggested by people who are connected to JVIP that you were operating a Ponzi scheme.
I have given you my...
Were you robbing Peter to pay Paul, Mr. Dabner?
Please get out of the car.
Where has all the money from investors gone, Mr. Dabner? Investors who gave Peter Dabner their hard-earned cash, in some instances their life savings, want answers to those questions. As you just heard, Peter Dabner didn't want to discuss any of it with us and just drove off.
I feel betrayed, really.
Because a lot of people's lives have been ruined.
It has been a very painful process.
In an email, Peter Dabner told us he refutes entirely and without reservation any suggestion of wrongdoing or fraud in the management of JVIP, adding that what happened to the companies would be fully scrutinised during the insolvency process. We also understand he has categorically denied the business was a Ponzi scheme.
Well, Colin joins me in the studio now. And Colin, you've discovered that someone claiming to be a whistleblower did previously raise concerns with the Financial Conduct Authority.
That's right, and this does appear to raise further serious questions about the actions of the FCA, who've been heavily criticised in the past. Now, we understand a former member of JVIP staff went to the FCA in 2020 with specific concerns about what they'd witnessed. The FCA says it subsequently took action against a separate investment company, resulting in it no longer being able to offer regulated financial services to customers. Now, in a statement, the FCA told us direct investments in property is not an activity regulated by the FCA, though pooled investment may require FCA authorisation. JVIP was not an FCA registered firm, or from the information we held, a firm that engaged in FCA regulated activity. The FCA says where we find concerns, they will take action, as they did in this case, in the case of a separate firm. What we do know is that JVIP continued in operation for 2 more years, taking in millions of pounds from investors. Of course, investors are deeply troubled to learn a former member of staff had raised concerns. What they want to know is, did the FCA properly perform its regulatory and supervisory duties? Was any information handed over to the police, who are now investigating investor complaints?
Colin, thank you very much. Well, Colin's investigation does feature on the BBC News website, when you can read more about that story.